Thanks, Neil. You actually gave me the opener. How many in the room know about GoDaddy? Okay, well, Anil, I think you're in that other group.
No, I had a senior moment there.
No, that's all right. Actually, my mom calls it Big Daddy.
Big Daddy?
Yeah.
My
anyway,
daughter calls it My Daddy.
My Daddy, yeah. That's good too. We'll take those as inspiration as we're continuing with the rebrand that's been ongoing. Well, first of all, thanks to the Cinder team, especially Kimberly, my colleague Jeff, who's in the back there, and I got in yesterday, took an earlier flight, and enjoyed the parade. And probably when you asked, we were just too shy to raise. We're too shy to raise our hand.
People too shy to put up their hand.
Yeah, but it's a ton of fun to be here, and we're looking forward to the next couple days, meeting a lot of you, and just having a conversation about the opportunity, and particularly how do we use technology to serve small businesses, and that's really the topic of my talk. Funny story, so I had some really nice slides prepared, and then I sent them to our legal team. And as some of you may know, we're currently in a quiet period, and so I got back 3 slides out of the 25 that I sent. And I was like, well, that's going to be tough to fill sort of the half-hour slot that I got. And so I had to kind of get a... We could do that. We could run through all the Super Bowl commercials, and that would be entertaining. But I figured, I do it a little bit different today, and just kind of tell you a couple of stories of, some of it more personal. And we're in Europe, and I grew up in Germany, so there's some nice stuff there. But also kind of just how we see the world, and some of the learnings we have without talking too much about GoDaddy. Definitely come find me or Jeff, who heads up our global reseller and partner program, and let's have a chat about some of the more specifics that we can share on a big screen. But just kind of before we get started, I think it's really good to just take a step back, and actually with the stuff that Neil just showed, it's actually it's almost like we coordinated this. But as we think about the world and sort of our audience and folks that we want to reach, we kind of look at sort of the people that have internet access, right? And that's been massively growing in the last couple of years, due to smartphones in particular. And that number, 3 billion, is probably already outdated, and it's probably closer to 4 now, and it's rising every day. And that's really powerful, because not just these are not just consumers for our customers, but they're potential customers as well, as they step into sort of their own journey of becoming an entrepreneur. And that looks very different in India, which is actually one of the big markets for us internationally, and growing rapidly, where sort of the concept of a small business is very different from the US. And so looking at that globally is a really interesting thing. We kind of pack sort of the global small business universe at about 210 million SMEs, and then if we go into the US, we actually kind of look at it a little bit more broadly than sort of the narrow SMB definition, and we throw in nonprofits, nascents. So nascents are people who are, maybe have a full-time job at a big company, but they dream about starting a company, and so they may come to us to buy a domain, maybe sort of something that they're just an idea at the moment, but one day it turns into a company, and helping them kind of make that step is what we're all about. We're here in Europe, and so I figured, I show actually some European stats, and I was actually pretty impressed or almost shocked when I saw this. 99 out of every 100 businesses in Europe are small businesses, and they employ 2 out of 3 employees in the European Union. So it's a really powerful stat, and one of them actually is my parents' shoe store, and this is where it's a little bit personal. So I was born in Cottbus. It's a small town in East Germany, and about 20 years ago, I was not of legal age yet. I started selling shoes with my parents, obviously around. So it's not no child labor or something like that. But I had fun. I was enjoying sort of being in the store and helping out. And around the same time, my parents switched from kind of all paper accounting and bookkeeping, everything was kind of just done on paper. They switched to their first kind of computer-based system, and it was an MS-DOS machine. And at night, when my dad would run sort of the backup tapes, it was on this kind of tape streamer bands. I don't know what they're called in English, actually. We just called them streamer bands. It was so loud that we were kind of in the next room. We couldn't hear the TV, and it was pretty horrible and not the greatest experience. But it was exciting, too, because, it was digital. And, my parents were, on the one hand, scared, and it felt like giving up control to sort of the machine. But at the same time, we're seeing sort of efficiencies, and so I was kind of right there, kind of, being sort of the geek in the family and sort of probably the most tech savvy in the family, helping them sort of, choosing the tools and the software, setting it up. So that was pretty interesting to kind of see that at the time, and it was probably the first lesson in software development, and I'm now product guy at GoDaddy, and I've done a couple startups. And that same rule still applies very much, which is simplicity. You got to have something that's really simple. It can't take long to set up and understand, but it's got to be just very easy to get started, because otherwise no one's just going to care to use it. And my parents were like that, and they're still like that. If a new tool comes around and they need to kind of read some long manual, or goes through like too many screens of setup, they're just going to give up. And we're like, look, we're just going to keep things doing as we've been doing successfully for the last 20 years. And, history is interesting here. My parents' shoe store has been around since 1869. And, so paper has worked really well for them. And so it's, just kind of something interesting to keep in mind as we all build products for this audience. And so I embarked on a journey that now brings me to GoDaddy. And one thing that when we actually partnered with GoDaddy, my startup was called Loku, and it was helping small businesses get found. And one of the first things in one of the first meetings that Blake, our new CEO, said was sort of the vision, and we kind of walked out, the founders of us were in the meeting. It was a pretty big meeting for a partnership, and Blake sort of told us this vision statement, and we walked out and we're like, wow, this is really powerful. This really resonates with us. And I'm gonna just read it. Our vision is to radically shift the global economy towards small business by empowering them to easily start, confidently grow, and successfully run their ventures. And that brings me back to, I don't know if there's a back thing here, to my parents' shoe store. I mean, that's really all it's about. I mean, you kind of just want to have the confidence of growing a business and know that you can successfully run it. And a lot of the other stuff really doesn't matter. I don't think my parents really care about shifting the global economy. I think that's, it's just about, making some money and providing food and, and other things for the family and security. But, I think, to me, as someone who has kind of seen this from the early days and kind of, has been building products for small business, that's really powerful, because, I live in San Francisco now, like Neil, and, I don't know, Neil, how you feel about it, but just kind of walking around the city, seeing small, independently owned stores, that to me kind of makes a city. And coming from Germany and being back in Europe, that's just so powerful. And I'm not a big fan of American malls, and if we can do something to help small businesses continue to grow and sort of beat the big guys, then I'm all game. So to technology. And so there, I was thinking about this talk, and now that I can't show really any numbers, I figured like, well, what are really the big trends that we've been seeing, and what are sort of some interesting, maybe in some cases not so obvious applications of technology. And so there were a couple of themes that just kind of jumped to the front of my head, and three are on this slide, and I think they all contribute towards actually shifting the global economy. And so the first one is do it with me technology. Kind of explains itself, but I think it's interesting for this audience as well, because even though the tools of doing it yourself have become easier and easier, and I would say they're probably in all the categories, there are products out there that someone can easily pick up and work with themselves. There's still a huge demand for actually having someone who can help, someone who you can just bounce a question off and who can work with you. And so I think there's a big opportunity for providing tools to help people, smaller, kind of firms, agencies, professionals that help small businesses and kind of, guide that interaction and provide, big data to some extent to kind of make smart choices for both the small guys and then the people who help the small guys. And at GoDaddy, we call them web professionals, web pros, and we're, kind of actually launching a bunch of tools right now that web pros can use to more easily interact with small businesses. And a web pro could be someone who's building sites for 2 or 3 customers or building the sites with them, or it could be a small agency that works with a couple hundred customers. But I think it's a really important part of the ecosystem, and I haven't really seen many tools out there who actually really make the web pros' life easier. So that's, I think, a really cool theme that that's kind of coming out of this, and where we can also leverage data, like knowing a certain web pro who's working with certain clients, leveraging some of the stuff that they're doing for other clients, and sort of making their life easier. The second part is sort of this one-click technology, and actually the kind of a good parallel to what's happening in the consumer space with Uber and other services, sort of the on-demand economy that Neil was just talking about. And I actually see that in small business technology as well, where Get Found is an example, our product, where you press a button and it will kind of list you everywhere on Google, on Yelp, instead of the customer having to go to the sites individually, setting up profiles and managing that actively, right? It's very easy, and it's kind of sort of where the world is moving towards in terms of what's expected, right? It no longer seems right to expect a customer to kind of do all the steps themselves. Another example is from our partnership with Office 365, Microsoft, where you buy a domain now and you want to set up email. I don't know who here has done that in the past for one of their domains, setting up email. It's a pretty complicated process. I don't want to say it's impossible, but I've certainly struggled through it, and now it's just that easy. It takes less than a couple minutes to provision, and you're ready to go, and you fill out 2-3 questions rather than click through plenty of forms. So that to me is kind of as close to a one-click experience as you can get with that, and it's really powerful, and customers just love it and adopt it. And before, when we saw a lot of them just kind of give up halfway through the process, they're now actually completing it, and so higher activation rates, good for us, but most importantly, it's good for the customer, and technology can help there, APIs and just doing things much more tightly integrated. Predictive technology, I think that would be kind of the example of the Prius and the kind of low tire pressure, was it? Where, I think that's interesting. I think, for us, so we have about 13 million customers, and a lot of them are, I don't think any two of them would see themselves as competitors, right? When you're a small business, even sort of coming back to my parents' shoe store, yeah, there are other shoe stores in the city, but quite frankly, they're friends. We know them. We hang out. Sure, some people may buy over there, and some people may buy with us. They're not the enemy. The enemy are maybe the bigger chains, and growing up, there's certainly certain brands that I wasn't too fond of. But the other small guys are kind of the friends, right? They're sort of the peers, and so why not leverage all the data that we have to help make smarter decisions, right? So we see something works for one customer in one geo in one segment, help get that knowledge to someone else, and kind of help them be more successful. It could be anything from email marketing is an interesting area where that can work, right? You learn something about a certain headline or a certain kind of template, and you kind of share that with other customers. And so overall, I think a bunch of these examples, we can group them sort of in 4 broad categories, and just for fun, I figured I may just kind of look at each of these and look at how sort of my parents have been doing that, or how we did it 15, 20 years ago, and what's possible now. And getting started is kind of hard. My parents just kind of stumbled into that. It was kind of family-run business since 1869, so they didn't really have to worry about getting it started or figuring out a name. But most folks today, the nascents who have an idea and who want to start a business, they actually start with a domain. They come to GoDaddy and they search for as long as it takes to find the perfect name, and that domain name, once they've bought it, often becomes their company name. So that's kind of interesting. What's really helped, where technology has really helped, I think, and I think this is something which I don't know whether even like many of us remember this, like before the internet, right? I mean, how did you find out what was kind of required to start a company, and what are all the steps you had to take? Well, maybe you went to like a local office or sort of the local, trade association, and there was maybe some materials, some books. You maybe went to the library. Today, it's all at your fingertips, and so that's just, it seems almost like too basic to mention, but that's just helped a lot. Give people confidence that they can do it. They can, see how others have done it, and so, it's just something that, it's almost like, yeah, of course I'm just going to call an Uber on my iPhone, but don't forget about the simple things that the internet has enabled. Getting found, we touched briefly upon it. My parents 20 years ago, newspaper ads, radio ads, it worked well. Small town, and they're still doing it actually. Sure, they now also have a presence on Google and other sites, but it doesn't always, I think here kind of the lesson for me has been, it doesn't always need to be just digital, but certainly, that's where kind of the trend is going. Getting connected, again, I think that's kind of email marketing. That's how do you connect with customers, marketplaces. I think, Neil mentioned a couple of examples. I think especially for folks who sell niche products. So think of someone who's carving, furniture, and it's really high-end, custom furniture. To find an audience, back in the day would have been really hard. It would have been almost exclusively word of mouth. Today, you may find their products on Etsy or their own online store, and that's just so powerful, right? Because now the whole world is sort of a potential customer. Getting paid, well, actually, this is probably one of the areas, I'm not an adopter of Apple Pay yet, and I still take out some cash on my credit card. I don't think that was ever very hard for sort of the average small business, but I think for businesses who transact online, obviously, so, anything that's being sold online, we've seen some massive improvements, even just around sort of security and, invoicing, tracking that, making sure people, businesses get paid. So definitely some improvements there, even though I'm a little less skeptical than Neil about sort of where, Apple Pay will go, and if we really see. I'm a little bit more skeptical, yeah, just because, I think taking out my credit card is not that hard. Even though, actually the other day, so I have a smartwatch, and the other day I was kind of going to the gate to catch my flight, and I saw that actually it was bringing up the little barcode, and so I was like, oh, heck, why not? So I went up and I tried to do this with my watch, and everybody was looking at me, and I looked like a total idiot. So it's probably the last time I did that, and it wasn't that much easier than taking out the phone and holding it there. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff, and I think we've seen sort of a couple of attempts to kind of break into sort of that space and facilitating that, and back to RFID. And then we had, what else do we have? We had QR codes. We had, a bunch of technologies that have come and gone really because the value add wasn't maybe, enough to really get sort of that widespread adoption. But yeah, so, just kind of a couple, actually this is kind of my only sort of, promotional slide really. GoDaddy started as really purely a US company, and yeah, people in Europe went to the US side and bought domains, but we, up until last year, we didn't really have a presence in Europe. We now have a big international team. We've launched in Europe. We have we have a team. We have an office here. We have a call center in Belfast that has local language support for all of the countries that we're in. And in the last 18 months, James Carroll, our head of international, and this team have rolled out to 37 countries and 17 languages. And that's not just putting up kind of a Spanish side in Argentina or Peru, but it's really localizing the content and the messaging and everything. So we're here to have conversations. We're open to partnering. This is a big challenge. I think everybody in the room working together to support small businesses. That's, I think, there's enough room for all of us. And yeah, we're very excited to be here, and find Jeff or me afterwards. And looking forward to raising a few pints and trying the Irish whiskey, which I'm trying to become more of an expert in.
So thanks, Rene. Before you sit down, I'd like to ask you one quick question.
Yeah.
And that's about your parents and whether they are using or considering, do they use any CRM platform? And do you imagine them ever using that to engage with their existing customers and build sort of a tighter connection with those customers? Or is it just that they're so friendly that everybody comes back to them? And
yeah, so my mom has a really good memory, so she will, oh yeah, hello, Mrs. So-and-so, great to see you again. And actually a lot of the customers, I mean, it's an older audience, it's kind of a more high-end shoe store, and a lot of the customers may even just kind of, it's in the center of the city, so they just come in to say hello, even if they're not looking necessarily to buy. So it's very high kind of relationship factor. However, and this was kind of one of the things that, we put in place, right in the beginning, was sort of we have a lightweight CRM, which is an Excel spreadsheet, which I think actually for a lot of businesses works really well, and does kind of its purpose. I've tried to get them sort of set up on email marketing solutions or to kind of do more digitally, but they're just not really adopting it. What they do though is they send a true letter, like mail, physical mail, once a year around the holidays, and my dad and my mom for months will have kind of Google Docs, will kind of go around the family to kind of fine-tune that message, and it's typically it's a very personal letter. It's like kind of reflecting on the year and has kind of reflecting on some of the macro trends, and people will come into the store till March, the following year, to kind of say thank you for the letter and how great it was, and they don't even get any mail anymore from their family members, and so it's really nice, and it's kind of old school in a way, and I've been like questioning that, but I actually see the value, and it takes a lot more effort than sending an email, but it has that personal touch, and it's I think we're I've actually been building sort of that base.
Final question, very simple. How old are they?
My dad's 70, turning 70 this year. My mom's a little younger, but yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So is George out there?
Okay.
George, floor is yours.
Quick start. To all of you which are waiting now on a list with for analytics tool or things like that, as it is mentioned in the agenda, the presentation doesn't have that in it because it's easy to key in Google, give me all analytics tools. I just want to guide you through to a decision that we have done at Herald, to a tool and a tool set, and what was behind that decision. At first we heard from Neil, you need a content strategy. That's an old message to all yellow pages. I think a lot of us have done that quite well. Building a data strategy is a new, or for someone maybe a new task to do, and it's not talking about how can I optimize my data collection team and my processes to get more business information, things like that. Building a data strategy in the context of online and internet is more how do I get user information into my into my area and own also this data. Oops, so just jump over that. There are some reasons for a data strategy, especially in the online sector. We're coming from a very low data collection in the last years. Today we're, Eric Schmidt said, in 2 days we are generating more data than we've done since the begin of mankind and the year 2003. And another prediction is that 30% of the CIOs, but it's not only a CIO topic, have to think about how they can grab all that data that we produce. And to give you an example, on the IYP sector, we are generating a lot of information that we're not thinking about users in the web. And we often have those informations in silos that we have to identify. And can I go back there? Yeah. Identify and use for us. This is just also a reason why you should think about doing that. Big data is always a big buzzword, but there is a lot of revenue behind. And also Neil said Spotify, for example, this is a big data engine. They collect a lot of information about a user, use it to market it, and that's where the money is in. So how have we done that at Herald and have done a lot of steps to come there? The first thing is you have to find and identify and check the data. And it's always hard to say what are those data. It's at the end of the day, you just have to think always about user, the user that is using your services, and all information that you can aggregate about him. Then you have to analyze it. Integration work means you have to just integrate processes into your organization to use those data, develop the data to a product and then market it. Yeah, that we mentioned already. We'll just run through that quickly. So data sources are often isolated. Examples, the website usage is not in correlation with purchases or stock level. I added their segmentation figures. When we talk about those data strategies, really open your mind and think about all of the data you have in your company available. It's not only the company information and the opening hours and payment methods. It's really the user on your websites. For example, in Herald, we have 16,000 websites sold for our customers. We have Herald AT, we have Herald Mobile, we have 2-3 different verticals out there. And we had a lot of those silos because we used different tools to analyze the users on those sites. Now we have one, and this brings a lot of insights and a lot of usable data for further marketing. Yeah, this is something I don't have to dig too deep into. This is something we all know, especially in the Yellow Pages area. So there really a lot of wrong data, obsolete addresses, different spellings, incorrect input. This is there because a causality check is also in the online world necessary. If you have different measurement methods, and that's starting with visits on your different websites and web services, you can't correlate them without really check if all those measuring methods are equal. Yeah, data are very various, structured, unstructured, historical, interconnected, semi-structured, geographic. Geographic will raise a lot of more in our area. And yeah, examples therefore, we have a lot of data on our platforms itself, and we often not use them for data generation that we can use. Yeah, business processes determine unit of analysis. That's just a short hint there. We started with a big thinking about how can we use data and how should our processes look like around the data. The better way is do it 100 or 180 degrees around. Just think about your processes, about your products, and then define how your data has to look like to support those structures. Yeah, as I mentioned before, user unique client sessions, page views, that's examples, but that's at the end one of the first things we are getting troubles. if those data is not transformed in the right way for your needs. And your IT has to grow with. You have to give your IT the time to come up with the right infrastructure for them. So that's something you can skip. How does that look like now for Herald? So where we started, you have the first point is always ensuring of your data of the data privacy. So as soon as we talk about user data, it's useful to have an eye on that. Business development have to develop applications or also processes to use this information. The IT should provide the infrastructure, and you need, and it's DST, stands for Data Science Team. At Herald we have now really dedicated people who are thinking about how you can use all those data that we generate and then use in marketing terms. That's really necessary. That, for example, we're using now with the tool I will mention on the next slides, and I'm not sponsored by them. Say that up front, but we're generating on Herald IT, for example, real-time demand information about a user. So he's searching for a plumber, he's looking for a hairdresser, but we also know in the background that he's also interested in buying an Audi or is looking for the next holiday where he can spend his holiday time. So you can really good combine their marketing messages on your own site. So now it's Google Analytics is one of the preferred tools that we come out of our analysis. Why is this? It's not Google Analytics in the way you may know in the free version. Meanwhile, Google has Google Universal Analytics. And we really implemented Google Universal Analytics in all of our platforms. So we have now one central point of reporting. And we get, the good thing there is with the segmentation tool from Google itself, you get a lot of more information about the user who is on your platform. And out of that, the cool thing there is you can use this information real time. So you can really combine it with double click and send messages out which are for a user, for a dedicated user, and not broad marketing messages. Okay, so this is, yeah, I think we've talked about that. Yeah, we have uniform KPIs. That's also necessary to know what happens on your platforms, and the central reporting is also very necessary to analyze your data. Yeah, and the holistic view on all data is very relevant. So you should think about getting all the data in that you have. Google Analytics is there also quite fine. You can upload a lot of data in correlation with your data you collect online. That's the challenge is to structure the data in the way to use it. But if you do that, you're fine with, and you get a lot of insights about your user, and you can market those information and those users by yourself and not via an agency. That's one of the relevant things in there. Okay. So.
Okay, George. Thank you. Doyle. So be thinking about questions for these folks. You know, like I want to ask George, you know, what are the things that you've learned out of this data analysis to go to market more efficiently and more effectively? But you can sit down, we'll ask these questions after Doyle. So you all need to be thinking about your questions for these folks. Doyle.
You got a slide? There we go. First of all, Neil, I think this is just an amazing, and I'm really appreciative of Kim and the association inviting us here to speak. But do you notice that two of us up here at the very beginning of the conference, instead of talking about advertising and marketing, we're talking about being found and helping get that data, digital presence management. And that's what UBL, companies like Yext, companies like GoDaddy are on a global basis to try to do. I hope for the next few minutes to talk a little bit about local data and how it's shaping consumer, especially around, unfortunately, half my presentation is Neil's repeat because the stats are the same, mobile's the same, data's the same, so I'm going to skip a few things as we go through.
You know what, we're behind, so that's good. So
well, I figure if we keep hitting them with it enough times, they're going to get the message that they got to get there, okay? Where's it at?
Do you have the clicker?
Yes.
Okay.
There is. So, like Neil showed you, the rate of technology is increasing. I think you guys know this, the adoption of each of these throughout the history. Some of this is historical, put together by some analysts. I just wanted you to have a good idea of what's happening, and that is that it's all about mobile, and mobile's going faster. We're now at the crossroads in this consumer behavior, and because of that, in the US, web and mobile are the primary places that people are looking for their data. They used to get their news and their information from TV, used to get it from radio. They're now getting it from the web and from the mobile. The same trends are also true here in Europe and Asia. Mobile is tied to local, and that's the major difference that I'm going to talk about, where Neil went out there and talked about a lot of different areas. I'm going to concentrate in on the local areas, how consumers are using those mobile phones to find businesses and spend money, and why that's important to find that data and make sure it's there. Need a new battery. Better. Got it. I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. Okay, so mobile offers a direct path to purchase. These are some of the stats out there, again, similar to the ones that Neil was showing. Most of you guys have seen these. It's just real important that we understand that everything is going mobile, everything is going local with local intent. 56% of the reason people are searching on their mobile is because they have some idea of what they want to do locally. 88% of the local searches result in some type of offline purchase, and 78% of smart users are now using these phones when they're out there looking for their local searches. The consumer economy has gone digital. There's no question about it. It's not a maybe, it has gone digital. Media companies like you that are here in this audience today must rethink and look at those strategies and how to take advantage of it. And in the changing world here, small businesses are now starting to try to figure out what's an effective online marketing strategy based around how they can gather and work with the consumers who are looking on these new local devices and mobile devices. The winning combination is digital and mobile first. If we were starting our company over again today, we would build everything to work off the mobile device, and you'll see some of that here at the conference. Businesses need to be found online and in mobile searches. Digital marketing is now the most effective means of over traditional media, and more important than that, it's not just about a website. The business needs to be able to market to their locations by having that data, and that's what this topic's about, is making sure their data is populated and showing up everywhere. In the United States, we understand the power of online marketing. 37% plan to spend more on internet marketing in the coming year. 75% of small businesses believe in internet marketing to be very effective. However, just thought I'd catch your guys' attention here with a little thing. This is something that businesses understand. They all start with a storefront. And when you have problems with your storefront, the business sees this as misleading and giving certain problems to people maybe not wanting to go inside their nasty buffet.
So do you go in and change all those things to make that slide? Do you like cut out the lights? That slide's very
Those are
good.
actual real situations, no changing. Today, online sites is becoming real important to the business. Your business website, your online profiles on search, social sites, and mobile apps will be the first place that these consumers are going to encounter with you. So your online profiles and your digital storefront are everything now. And the digital, like your storefront outside, any mistakes, anything that's not showing up, anything that's not populated, you're missing important data that the consumer is trying to make a business decision, and you're not there where they can be found. One of the things that we're trying to do hard is educate businesses and channel partners and media companies about the importance of this. Businesses in Europe and Asia are just now learning the training. As we've sold thousands of businesses here in Europe, we have found both the sales forces and the end users and businesses are still learning the value of the product, the importance of having their data populated everywhere. Companies like us are working on this and trying to help them understand the value of the importance of having that data in their digital storefronts. And of course, these businesses are also starting to participate actively in things like Google and Facebook. Businesses need to be found everywhere. Their data must be populated everywhere. The consumer is looking for them in multiple different places, not just in one site, but in thousands of different ways, navigation devices, mapping devices, and other places. Media companies like you must learn to keep pace with this change. Moore's Law, if y'all are familiar with that, where the computing device changes and doubles in power every 2 years. I guess we can call this one Neil's Law, because I think digital is moving at a pace about every 6 months. And I think you have to learn, adapt, change, and think of your strategies and the way to connect with your customers and help those businesses be able to market online. The future is mobile, though, and that's what you heard from Neil, and that's what you heard from Renee. Everything is going mobile. Location marketing has to embrace the mobile revolution. Location marketers have to look at additional content. The data that's important for the consumer behavior now isn't just about name, address, and phone number. They want to know about what brands there are. They want to know what hours you're open. They want to know pictures and comfort, the reviews and ratings. Here's some information that you may or may not know. But this is what's happening quickly in the mobile ecosystem. Starting April 21st, all searches on mobile devices on Google will present results that identify and prioritize mobile-friendly sites. This is very important that marketers understand that, and then eventually businesses are educated to understand that too. Mobile-friendly sites are going to rank higher in search results from mobile devices. Google is actually allowing app developers now to use mobile search results to guide users to the website or to the app, and if your website isn't mobile-friendly, Google's giving you a big incentive to do that. So meeting the needs of the mobile consumer, the critical data points are that it matters to the consumer as to whether that store is open or not. That's kind of the very basics of where they start to look. Just looking for hours, are you there? But the right mix of the different sites in the location marketing campaign will also include a strong mobile presence for every company. Again, mobile is becoming dominant. I don't need to repeat this. You've heard it already from Neil. Also, you want to keep an eye on the future. It's going just like Neil said. It's when you start seeing Tesla and others, you're starting to see the Google car, you're going to see the Apple car, you're going to see devices that are working off there. You're going to see smartphone technologies that will be incorporated inside the car. Again, all the majors are working on this, and this is important because this is where the consumer is looking for their data. So the bottom line of what I would tell you is that it's all about the data, both local, geo-marketing, location-based, and geofencing. It's all going to be about the data that they can find and populate everywhere. It's all about the data.
Because you know I'm all about the data, about the data, about the data. I'm all about the data, about data. I'm all about the
Okay, it's time for audience participation. Questions? Questions for any of our panelists? We have about 15 minutes, Kim, don't we?
About 10.
We have 10 minutes.
Can I start for Renee? Question, how many, what percentage, because I know you can't say numbers, what percentage of the SMB sites on GoDaddy are actually, do you know if they're being done by the SMBs themselves or are they being done by somebody else? That would be my first question. And the second question is, once they do that, how many are actually stay active?
Well, and the third question I'd add is, based on Doyle's comment about April 21st and Google sort of having a preference for mobile sites, how many are mobile ready? So those are three questions, Renee. Can you do those three?
Yeah, let me try to do it in 3 words. Yeah, so I guess let me try to parse this. So we don't necessarily know whether the person who buys, the subscription to Site Builder is, the person who then also owns the store, whether it's a, brother, friend, what we call a moonlighter, someone who's kind of doing it sort of in their free time for a business, right? And that was part of the rationale for actually having a more formal program, GoDaddy Web Pro, GoDaddy Pro, for those web pros to actually give those folks more specific tools and also help us segment them better and understand exactly the answer to your question. However, and I don't know if I can share sort of overall numbers, but let me just say we're among the biggest, paid site builders in terms of number of customers, and those are all do-it-yourself customers. We also have a team in our customer care center that builds sites for customers, and so then sort of this kind of gray area of folks who kind of the do it with me that I mentioned. It's just really hard to kind of to know that from sort of looking at the past, and that's why we're kind of rolling this out. But to your question, yes, everything is kind of for mobile as well. So whether the site is looked on mobile or desktop, you don't have to build a separate site. It's mobile friendly.
Well, I guess I was wondering, as your customers come on or you see their sites, what's your sense of how many of those are mobile or responsive ready?
Yeah. Actually, one interesting stat, even going one level higher, is 50% of the small businesses that we kind of see don't even have a site, and about half of those don't want a site, and the other half just doesn't know how. And then of those 50% who have a site, your question was how many of those are mobile friendly already?
Mobile or responsive, yeah.
Yeah, I mean
very few.
Very, very few.
Yeah.
There's still a big.
I know that the folks at Buzzboard have seen those numbers start to grow over time, some of the mobile sites, but there's still a relatively small number. Hey, George, I'd like to ask you a question about how do you marry data science with business thinking? Okay, so you mentioned that you are hiring data scientists, but how do you sort of connect the dots for the data scientists and the business thinking? What's going to go on there? Because I think that's a big thing that's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
Because they can grind numbers and do all sorts of correlations, but how do you apply that?
A lot of talks, really. You have to talk a lot about the topic. I mean, to start, if you find the right data analyst, the first work for a data scientist is to identify all those sources and to come up with some kind of global map of your data structure that you have in your company. Therefore, he talks to a lot of people in the company, and then you really have to convince department by department to come back also with data. Yeah. And yeah, so we are still in a phase of talking about implementing the data strategy. Because that's turning around time after time. As soon as you find some outcomes, what you can do with this data, you get new ideas.
So you're still in the exploratory stage of this whole data science thing, right?
Yeah, we have first outcomes and first things that we can use, but we are if you have a scale from 1 to 10, I think we are 2 at the moment.
Yeah. Doyle. Question for you. So, you hear things about how bad the listings environment is. You guys have been in it for a while. Yexta's been in it for a while. Is it any better?
No.
So okay, that's a loaded statement, and maybe it's a loaded question.
Let me give a little bit more color to that, if I could, please.
Sure.
The complexities are changing. There's new players, like you were mentioning. Look at the importance of Apple. Apple just sold 73 million new devices in the last 90 days. If your business isn't showing up when people are going to Apple Maps, you had a bad day. When we started the business, Apple wasn't important. There are new GLTDs, new special sites that might be important for a plumber to be into or a hotel and so forth. The complexities have gotten more. I compare it to the tax industry, where it's gotten so complex in U.S.
the tax code in the U.S.?
Yeah, and so so there's been multi-billion-dollar industry created helping companies be able to navigate take care of itself. Yeah. And so basically, we're navigators at this point, and I think it's going to continue. It's still kind of like he said, in the second or third inning of a 9-inning San Francisco baseball game.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience
Hey,
before
Neil,
we...
can I
Yeah,
add something
Renee,
to this?
please.
It's kind of tying all this together. Actually thought of something kind of interesting, which is, back to your question about sites being mobile friendly. Well, there's also a difference between taking a desktop site and just translating it into mobile friendliness.
That's
and actually,
not a mobile-friendly site. That's
right,
a desktop site that has been pushed into a mobile experience.
Exactly, and so I think the key, and this is, I think, important takeaway, which is, hey, someone who is, say, 5 minutes away from your store, going to your mobile, experience, what should they see? Certainly not what someone, 200 miles away or 200 kilometers away on a desktop, visiting a desktop site should see, right? So it could be a coupon, hey, come in now and get 20% off, versus the person on the desktop far away may just kind of see a video about sort of the history of the shop, right? So I think, to really do that, you need sort of data science, and then kind of adding in the complexity of where that kind of business is kind of seen on what kind of device, on what kind of platform. I think there's, and I think you made a really brilliant point here. There's a really new complexity, which I think it also kind of makes the lines between presence and getting found very blurry in terms of what kind of the services should be able to provide. So a website builder, may no longer be enough just to kind of produce a pretty looking site if it doesn't have some of those components.
Okay, great. So Kim, I think it's time to, there's one, we'll do one final question up here at the front. Hold on, let me get your mic. It's right up at the front. And you guys can use that mic to answer the question.
It's all very interesting, but there seems to be a gap between the fact, Neil, that you've been foreseeing the trends and the growing pace of trends, and on the other hand, let's take the very basic phenomena of figures that I know of. Let's say 80% of the websites are not mobile ready. There is a gap here between the realization that the trend is in that direction, and you can foresee it for 5 years, and all that is right. What is wrong with the industry that doesn't manage coping with that? The pace of change is difficult, but those things are foreseen for so long. Is it the realization that the service is not good, the technology is not good? Part of the solutions that we've been hearing are that we are in a transition phase, in an exploratory mode, but this is a situation for so many years. Why doesn't it happen?
All right, Doyle.
Well, I think a little bit of it is the consumer's expectations and the way they're searching. It used to be you went to a website and you were looking for chicken wings, you'd look at restaurant menus for 3 or 4 and the nearest. Now you just type it in, nearest place for chicken wings, and you expect that to come in from...
Customers are never wrong. It's only the service provider. They have expectations. You have to manage them.
The point I'm making is a website is just one tool. The importance is to have that data populated through other places that profile is found, because the way people are searching, their expectation, because the indexing and sophistication has really changed to where that information is coming up. You could type in, what's the next flight out of Dublin to Charlotte? You don't have to go to a website or an airline. That information will come up in different ways because of the data.
So what you're saying is the consumer continues to be way ahead of the business owners in their adaptation and adoption of these technologies.
Yeah, I don't think business owners understand how important it is.
I think Renee wanted to say something, but that's okay. There are 2 microphones up there, and they look like you could hit each other over the head with those too. They're nice and soft. Renee.
I was thinking about this a little bit, and I think you're right. I think the service providers, given the acceleration of innovation, we haven't seen this similar maybe acceleration of sort of adoption from the service providers of some of these new services. And I would argue that there are probably examples where there's been adoption too quickly of new services that hasn't led to sort of the business outcome, and that has created maybe some of sort of the hey, I'm just going to wait and see what happens here, and then that's kind of where we are right now. ultimately, you know, more of, I mean, I think there's an equilibrium that we're getting close to where, you know, a lot of sort of the platforms will be more established. And, you know, whether it's, you know, right now, you know, take the connected home, right, or take sort of, you know, wearable devices. We're very early, right? But you're already, in terms of mobile now, you know, there's pretty good understanding of what's sort of the norm and what's expected and what are sort of the use cases. So service providers can sort of, you know, understand what they should adopt, and there are folks like us who are building tools to help them, you know, leverage that. But there are areas, and you know, whether it's kind of the iWatch or sort of Nest or, you know, kind of whatever, the PlayStation at home. Yeah, how am I going to leverage that as a small business, right? And you know, no one has really been
I don't think we
thinking
know what
much
that
about
is
that.
yet.
Yeah.
All right, so let's give these guys a warm round of applause, please.